In the year 1887, Friedrich Nietzsche put pen to paper and produced one of the most haunting passages in modern philosophy. He asked, "What does nihilism mean?" And he answered that the highest values devalue themselves, that the aim is lacking, that the question why finds no answer. These words were not idle speculation, they were a diagnosis. Nietzsche was capturing a sickness spreading quietly across the Western world, the erosion of meaning itself. What happens, he wondered, when the foundations of our beliefs, our morals, and our values, all that has guided humanity for centuries, begin to collapse? What happens when life's great why no longer has an answer? That shadow, Nietzsche warned us, is nihilism. For more than a century, philosophers, writers, and seekers have returned to this question. Some call it prophecy, others call it despair, and still others, like Nietzsche himself, saw it as a challenge to confront the void directly, without flinching, and to discover whether humanity might build new meaning from the ashes of the old. In this lecture series, we will walk through this shadowed landscape. We will ask what nihilism is, trace its history, and explore the role it played in Nietzsche's thought. In time, we will see how he wrestled with it, and how he envisioned a way beyond it. But tonight, in this opening lecture, we begin with the roots, with the meaning of nihilism, its forms, and its significance to the story of Western civilization. Though the seeds of nihilism reach back thousands of years, the word itself only began to spread in the mid-19th century. In 1862, the Russian novelist Ivan Turgenev published Fathers and Sons, a story that would bring the idea of nihilism to popular imagination. In the novel, a young character is asked, "What does it mean to be a nihilist?" His reply was as startling as it was simple: "A nihilist is a man who does not bow down before any authority, who does not take any principle on faith, no matter how sacred it may appear." To some, this sounded like liberation, the courage to throw off old chains. To others, it sounded like anarchy, a rebellion against everything that gave order to society. The book ignited debates across Russia and Europe, and the word nihilism took root. At first, the term was political. It meant the rejection of institutions, traditions, and authority. But as time passed, it grew deeper. Philosophers and writers began to see nihilism not just as political rebellion, but as a denial of truth, morality, value, and even the meaning of life itself. The word became heavier, more ambiguous, and more terrifying. Nietzsche himself, in his unfinished work The Will to Power, described nihilism as the radical repudiation of value, meaning, and desirability. A frightening thought, for if nothing is valuable, if nothing is desirable, then what remains for us to strive toward? Later, the philosopher Donald Crosby organized these shadows into 4 distinct forms. Moral nihilism denies that moral principles are objective or binding. If morality is not real, then nothing can be called good or evil in any ultimate sense. Justice and injustice dissolve into mere opinion. Epistemological nihilism goes further, denying truth itself. It argues that knowledge can never escape the boundaries of perspective. What is true for one may be false for another, and there is no higher ground from which to judge. Cosmic nihilism stares into the stars and declares them indifferent. Nature, it says, carries no message, no value, no care for human beings. The universe is vast, silent, and unfeeling. And finally, existential nihilism. This is the form that haunts us most. It declares that life itself is meaningless, that all our strivings, our loves, our sufferings, are without purpose in an indifferent cosmos. It is the form Nietzsche feared most, and the form that continues to echo across our modern age. For when one accepts the first 3, the collapse of morality, the denial of truth, the indifference of nature, existential nihilism follows like a shadow. If nothing holds meaning in the world, then how can life itself be meaningful? But here we must pause and ask, what is meaning? What exactly is being denied? Philosopher David Rupnik explained that the word meaning has 2 senses. It can signify as in saying a pig means a four-legged mammal, or it can intend as in saying I meant to do it. When we say life has meaning, we suggest that it has a purpose that can be explained, shared, and identified with. If that purpose exists but cannot be known, it may as well not exist at all. For life to be meaningful, its purpose must be graspable, relatable, and real. But why do human beings crave this meaning so desperately? Thinkers have speculated, but no final answer has been reached. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of Nietzsche's greatest influences, suggested it is because of suffering. We are creatures condemned to pain, fully aware of our own mortality. Faced with death and suffering, we yearn for a higher purpose, something to justify our existence. For most of history, humanity answered this yearning by looking beyond the world we live in. Plato spoke of a realm of perfect forms. Descartes imagined a spiritual dimension. Kant described the nominal world. And Christianity offered the kingdom of heaven. These two-world theories gave people hope that their struggles were not in vain. This world with its pain and injustice was only a shadow. The true world, higher, purer, eternal, was the source of value and truth. The goal of life was to reach it. Christianity, above all, offered this conviction. For nearly 2,000 years in the West, it gave people meaning, the belief that no matter how poor, sick, or oppressed they were, their lives had a purpose. Every act of faith, every suffering endured, was a step toward salvation. This belief was not just comforting. It was powerful. It gave courage to endure suffering, even to embrace it, knowing that an eternal reward awaited beyond death. As the anthropologist Ernest Becker once put it, Christianity could take even slaves, cripples, and outcasts, and make them into heroes simply by placing them within a larger story. But Nietzsche saw what was happening in his age: the decline of Christianity, the weakening of faith in the two-world view. Science, with its discoveries, was steadily dissolving the Christian worldview. The earth was no longer the center of the cosmos. Humanity was no longer God's favored creation. The heavens were no longer a divine realm, but empty space. Nietzsche captured this collapse in his famous declaration, "God is dead." Not that God was literally slain, but that belief in him, belief in the true world of Christianity, was dying. And with that death, the meaning it provided was vanishing as well. He foresaw a crisis. With the collapse of the two-world theory, the foundations of meaning would tremble. Science, though powerful in explaining how the world works, could not tell us why it matters. As physicist Steven Weinberg later remarked, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. Nietzsche knew that this was the heart of nihilism, not just the absence of belief, but the collapse of meaning itself. And he warned that the coming centuries would be defined by how humanity responded to this void. The scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, the decline of faith, all of these were steps on a path Nietzsche believed was inevitable. He wrote, "What I describe is the history of the next 2 centuries. The advent of nihilism. Our entire European culture is moving toward catastrophe, like a river rushing to the sea." He was not merely predicting despair. He was predicting a reckoning. For when the stories that sustained us are stripped away, what remains? How do we endure suffering without the promise of heaven? How do we live without a greater purpose to guide us? This was Nietzsche's great question, and it is why nihilism occupies such a central place in his philosophy. For him, the collapse of meaning was not just a problem for a few philosophers. It was the destiny of an entire civilization. And so, as we conclude this introduction, we return to the shadow Nietzsche named nihilism, the radical repudiation of value, meaning, and desirability. In the next lecture, we will turn to suffering, and the role it played in Nietzsche's thought. For if nihilism begins with despair over life's pain, perhaps it is through pain itself that the seeds of a new meaning might be found. Until then, we sit with the question: If life has no given meaning, no higher aim, no final why, can we bear it? Can we live without illusion? Or must we, like Nietzsche, attempt to create new meaning where none is given? That is the question of nihilism.